Hi guys and welcome to Whisky Geek. I'm Ben and today I'm doing a side-by-side comparison of the 25-year-old and the 18-year-old Bunnahabhain. So when we visited the distillery recently, we did the premium tasting and came away with all of these lovely samples, two of which were the 25-year-old and the 18-year-old. Now I've tasted these side-by-side before a couple of times and I've always come to the same conclusion, but they've always been presented to me 18-year-old first, 25-year-old second. Now, because I think there is more subtleties to the 25-year-old, I kind of think the 18-year-old might be squashing the 25-year-old. So I'm going to do them the other way around this time and compare to my existing notes, see if they come across a little bit different or I get largely the same thing. So first up, the 25-year-old. Now, Bunnahabhain do all natural colouring, no chill filtration, and this whisky comes out about a shade 8 Sauternes, a lovely crisp gold. So obviously the minimum age of whiskies that have gone into this is 25 years old. There'll be some older selections in there as well, and it's got that typically fruity sherried style which Bunnahabhain are known for, and it's bottled at 46.3%, so a decent ABV. Let's see how it fares on the nose. So it's quite a delicate, a soft nose to begin with. There's some citrus tones, resinous wood, hay. There's a sherry presence, but it's not really at the forefront, it's more subdued than a lot of the Bunnahabhains. There is a gentle prickle to it, but it's quite a delicate nose. So there's a kind of floral and buttery aroma that plays off of the hay. And then all those sherry tones start to come out, and there's sultanas, there's demerara sugar, candied peels, all of those kind of tones that you'd expect. Now as it breathes and disperses, the sweet aromas are kind of diverting and developing. It becomes more caramelly and nutty, still behind that resinous and the hay, but quite a nice development, a bit of a change. So that's not really that different to how it's come across to me before, so maybe the order hasn't really been changing things. Now let's see if it's the same story on the palate. Okay, so on the palate there is a much better delivery of the flavours having it this way around. Having it after the 18 was smothering this really nice, wholesome hazelnutty tone which is coming through now. I had previously noted down that it was a little bit thin. It's still on the delicate, the subdued side, but that hazelnut tone is kind of the core of it, and it ties everything together. So when I wasn't getting that before, I was much more critical of it, but drinking it on its own as a starting point, it's much, much nicer. So it's got all these rich, woody oak tones that come up alongside the hazelnut, and they're what's at the forefront. But there's like a vinous, kind of winey tone to it. And then all these spices begin to develop and give it a little bit more playing about on the tongue. There's a bit of a briny tone as well, but it's kind of dull. It's not like salt, it's just a hint of it, a waft of it in the background. Whilst I am enjoying it more this time around, I still don't think it's got that wealth of flavours that you'd expect at this price point or for this age of whiskey. It's definitely got a lot of the aged characteristics, it's just not got much backing it up, if you know what I mean. So it really comes alive again for the finish. It's about on par with the nose for me. You've got plenty of those nutty tones come through. The spices, they're really wholesome and full. You got cloves and cinnamons, not at all prickly, but very present. Then that musty wood is still in there. It's got a good length, and hidden behind it all there's some of those traces of the sweet tones, the citrus and the sherry flavours. It's really, really pleasant on the finish, and it sits with you for a good length of time. So one thing I've noticed with the 25-year-old each time I've had it is it benefits from breathing, but it's a very fine balance. You get more of those caramel and nut tones come through, but then quite abruptly it begins to go flat, and so it's a fine line to walk. So for me, I'd be careful about how much you pour at a time. If you've afforded a bottle like this, play it safe and just a little bit at a time and tease those flavours out. So next we're on to the 18-year-old, and this one comes through as a really nice burnished gold. It's about a shade 13 or Old Madeira. And again, this one's bottled at 46.3%, so a good ABV for delivering flavours. The nose is just so much richer for me. There's loads and loads of that sherry influence, but it's coming through as dark sugars, treacle. There's still kind of a sherry vinous tone in there, fortified wine tone, but loads of candied peels and citrus, plums. There's a licorice and a rounded woody tone, but it's really nicely balanced. It's lovely and soft with a subtle little prickle creeping in the background. There's walnuts and then a resinous high note begins to creep in. Those woody tones take a dusty turn, and there's kind of a salty tone that begins to come in. It plays off of the brown sugars again and goes a little bit salted caramel. There's kind of a rounded bitterness in there, like a dark chocolate or coffee beans. And plenty of spices bringing a bit of a warmth, like cinnamon sticks, and that kind of reminiscent of mulled wine playing off of the fruits of the sherry. It's a really lovely nose. There's loads to explore in this one. So let's see how well that transfers to the palate. It's got quite a thick, oily texture, really nice mouthfeel, and there's a little prickle that comes through. But that slowly subsides and gives way to a wealth of the sweeter tones. There's a bit of citrus, the sherry influence, and there's some nice walnuts and dark chocolate coming through as well. It's a little bit warming, but it's really, really pleasant on the palate as well. The finish brings a warm prickle and it's lightly bitter. It's woody with a cracked black pepper, and then behind it those sherry tones subtly linger on, nice and sweet, and still quite nutty. Really pleasant, you can probably tell, but I really like that one. In a bit of a contrast, I think the 18-year-old doesn't benefit that much from airing, from dispersion. I think the sherry tones die down and those woody tones begin to gain dominance, and it loses a bit of its composure, a little bit of its balance. So still air it for a few minutes, but not too long. Be a bit delicate with it to get the most out of it. For me, this 18-year-old is a reminiscent cask selection to the Sturadar, only it's been aged for 3 times as long. It's just way more refined, but it's still got all of that sherry oomph behind it. It's really, really pleasant. Plenty of character. So I've given the 25-year-old a rating of 88 out of 100, and I've given the 18-year-old a rating of 90 out of 100. So I've been lucky enough to try these whiskies side by side 3 times now, and each time I've come to the same conclusion. Drinking them this way around didn't change it, although I did enjoy the 25-year-old a little bit more in isolation. The 18-year-old was just as spot on as ever for me. Now, ignoring the fairly large price difference, the 18-year-old wins for me. This is where I'd put my money. That's not to belittle the 25-year-old, it's still incredible. I just don't think that it's got the same balance, the same composure. It loses the sherry and emphasises the woody tones, the aged tones. If it carried through more of that sherry oomph and bolstered it with the wood, I think it would be a little bit better. But that's just my take. So please, if you've had a chance to try both of these, I would be super interested to know what you make of them. So cheers for watching, guys, and joining me for another whiskey comparison. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please chuck a comment and a like below, and consider subscribing. Cheers. I want every last bit of it.